What's going on, YouTube? It seems like a lot of you guys want to know how to properly play and do footsies. So the number one thing that I want to discuss with you guys is understanding what exactly is footsies. I know I have a video on footsies, but I'm going to do a little more in-depth breakdown. But it's going to be a short video, but more into depth so you can understand how to play footsies. But first, the number one thing is understanding exactly what is footsies. So footsies is referring to like the ground game and the mind games happening in mid-range spacing, where players use pokes, whip punishes, and movement to control space and bait reactions against your opponent. This is going to help you open up your opponent because a lot of times characters in this game don't really have strong 50-50s, or they don't have fast 50-50s. So some of these characters have to rely on playing footsies in order to open up their opponent. And in this video, I'm going to give you a few examples of I guess you can say examples of footsies and some of the things that you guys didn't know that were footsies. So we're going to be talking about pokes, we're going to be talking about whiff punishing, forward advancing normals, movement spacing, low profiling, and avoidance. All right, let's get right into the video. All right, first things first, the number one character that annoys me but also has really good footsies in my opinion has to be Reptile. The reason being is because he has a really good stagger game. He has a back three that's really good for low profiling or catching your opponent at a range where they think they're safe. And this is so hard to whip punish. Like this string is really hard to whip punish. So you can kind of just throw the string out. Anyway, the first thing that I want you guys to understand is pokes, fast pokes, and safe normals. This is going to be your footsie tools that you're going to want to utilize. Plenty of characters have it. It's totally up to you to figure out what exactly do you have to play footsies with that character in particular. My opinion, when it comes to this character, you're going to be using like stand 1, which is also +3 on block. It's this, which is also 0 on block as well. And it's also super good for auto spacing, as you can tell. I back up slightly, and then on stand 1 I'm plus, so I have no time to actually backdash and create mind games off of this. So a lot of times people don't understand when you're throwing out plus frames like this and backing up. A lot of times I'm looking for my opponent to press a down poke or use a button, and I can whiff punish that, and that would allow me to open up my opponent when I don't have 50-50s, and I can create mind games off of that, as you can see right there, right? And I can do this off of any button in particular. I can do it off my 1-1, as you can see, and this is what exactly some characters have to play off of in order to open up their opponents. You also have strings like this too, and so on and so forth. Another example of pokes is one of my favorite, which is called checking. Checking is something that you kind of use to kind of like bait your opponent and thinking that they can press, or just keep them at bay where they can't actually just dash up for free. You're checking their movement. And Rain is one of the few characters in the game that can kind of like just spam his moves. You can't really necessarily just dash in at this character. You got to be careful of this string, even though it is kind of negative. You can't really necessarily punish it. So I'm gonna turn on the frame data for you guys so you can kind of just visually see what it looks like. So when I'm throwing the string out, it is -12, but it's also very hard to kind of like punish this. So no character really has a button to deal with this unless you have like a 9-frame mid, which essentially Johnny has, but you just have to be careful because you can also cancel this into a special move as well. And then he can be safe and so on and so forth. So a lot of times you can use this against certain characters that are oppressive or have really good pressure, or just really good at movement speed and kind of getting in on you really quick. You can use this to kind of check your opponent and their movement. Another footsie tool, one is my favorite, is called whiff punishing. You can kind of bait your opponent to press a button, and you can whiff punish them like that as well. But sometimes your opponents like to shadow box and throw out buttons in the neutral, and it's totally up to you if you have a button to kind of whiff punish them for throwing out buttons in the neutral. So it's okay to throw buttons out like this and you know, kind of shadow box in some cases where you think your opponent's going to dash at you or whatever. You can go in and out like that. But it's also really important to understand that a lot of characters can actually punish you for doing stuff like that. So if for whatever reason I wanted to shadow box with Raiden and I wanted to throw this string out, like I just wanted to throw this out but be safe, kind of just bait my opponent to think that I'm going to do the full string, see how I'm safe off of that. Like when he doesn't react fast enough, he can kind of like just bait me to press a button, and from there with down one's being negative on block, he can kind of just like down one me back and then take his turn back, strike throw me, and so on and so forth. But if you're anticipating a whip punish and you're playing that mental stack of just zoning your opponent out by doing stuff like this, and then finally your opponent does like a string like this, you can actually punish that on reaction, but it's totally up to you. See how that was a punish? You see? So things like that are really important to understand when you're sitting here playing neutral. You can whip punish your opponent. And then you can get a combo. You can go for whatever it is in particular that you want to go for. You can also do things that's similar, which is called buffering, where I just did right there, where and in particular for Lee May, she doesn't really have any risk behind buffering with her character. So like if I was to do something like this, even if my opponent blocked that, I'm most likely going to be safe because they're going to block the projectile because how quick it was and they weren't ready for it, or they just wasn't ready for that layer. So in reality, they're going to block that and I'm going to be safe. But if they don't block it and they get hit from it, I get a combo. So there's no risk really behind it, even though you can duck it, but most players won't duck it on reaction, I should say. Another one is forward advancing normals, where understanding that forward advancing normals are really strong because a lot of times your opponent will want to reset neutral or back up because they don't want to deal with whatever it is in particular that you're doing. And then on some cases, in rare occasions, when you're +1, +2, sometimes your opponent can back up, so they don't really have to necessarily deal with your next move. Some characters just don't have moves in particular that jail you, except for like down one after being plus. And a lot of times players don't want to just give up their turn by doing down one. So they essentially do something in particular that doesn't necessarily jail, but allows them to have a little more pressure. In that case, some people will necessarily back up. And then from there, they can actually get caught from trying to back up because some characters have forward advancing normals that are really, really strong. For an example, you have Tanya. I didn't pick the character, but I wanted to show you other characters in particular that have forward advancing normals as well. You have Kenshi, and you also have Liu Kang. Kenshi's forward advancing string is always going to be this string. It's actually really good because, as you can tell, it pushes me forward slightly, and then the full string pushes me even further as well. Right from here, I can do things like this. It's going to allow me to be safe. That doesn't have a gap, so I can kind of just throw this string out, and it would catch my opponent. Some cases, in rare occasions, you can actually even do this and your opponent will get hit by the low because it throws them off just because they weren't ready for it or they thought they were out of space where it wouldn't connect. See how that's still connecting even at a certain range? So if I was pressuring my opponent with strings like this and I hit him with the low, this will kind of throw my opponent off because he wasn't necessarily ready for it. And then from there, I can kind of combo off of it or I can create pressure as well. And it goes the same way with like certain strings. Like if I was to do this would kind of catch my opponent off guard. If I did like forward 2, back up slightly, and then I did this string. A lot of my strings are relatively safe. As you can tell, there's -1. So with that being said, I can kind of neutral duck into another button, or I can back up and then whip punish with forward 2. So I can do things like this. Back up slightly. Back up slightly into forward 2, and as you can tell, this has so much range on it that it actually shuts down neutral. So since it shuts down neutral, this is going to be one of my best strings to catch my opponent backdashing, advancing forward, trying to jump, OS duck, and it's also mid. So it's going to cover so many different options. So again, not a lot of characters have strong 50/50s, but they also have good advancing, forward advancing normals that also help them with footsies, which essentially helps them open up you in particular or their opponent. I also wanted to show you other characters that have other tools in particular that allow them to help them open you up or deal with certain things in particular. So they can use a move like this that kind of like shuts down your opponent trying to advance at them. So like I can use this move and catch you trying to advance at me, and I can use back 3. So let's say my opponent wanted to use like his down 3. After I did something like this, hold on, I can do that. Another key trick that you can do as well is that when you're backing up, you can just throw out X because you're backing up. And since you're backing up, you just press X, you're always going to get this input no matter what. Tanya, Fort 2 being in so advancing that it shuts down neutrals so much and it catches opponents trying to backdash and whiff punish you. It's so strong that, and it has so much range. And then if you put this a ring around you, you also get even more advancing. If you double dash into a move, you get even more range. So this move really shuts down neutral and it allows you to open up your opponent and can be very oppressive for certain characters that play off of whiff punishing you or countering you. This shuts down their game plan a lot, and from there you can kind of oppress your opponent just with being able to have an advancing string. Okay, in rare cases where there's two different types of characters, there's really quick, you have something called movement and spacing, right? There's some characters that have really good movement and spacing, and it's usually because they have really bad buttons. But on the contrary, Johnny has really good buttons. But since Johnny has really good buttons, it makes your opponent want to block a little more longer than any other character. And since he does that, he's going to be able to play off of his movement a lot more, which is going to open you up. So playing off of buttons in particular that aren't necessarily plus, but you can also use your plus frames to kind of like back up and whiff punish your opponent too. So you can do things like this, or you can do 1-1. Then you can back them to 4-3 because it's advancing string, but it's also playing off of the fact that you have really good movement. And since you have really good movement, you can back up slightly into 4-3, which also has really good spacing. But then you also can use your 4-3 because it's 9 frames and it's really quick and advancing. So you can kind of bait your opponent into thinking that you're backing up, but then you kind of throw them off by coming forward with an advancing string. It can throw them off just by you having good movement and spacing. So it's on the contrary. But in reality, characters like Conan is super slow and he doesn't have those buttons to play up close. So he plays at a range that usually opens you up off of movement and spacing. And the reason why he has good movement is because he's super slow, but he also has really good advancing strings, as you can see, that kind of throws off your opponent. But the spacing is really important because he's super slow off of the string, which is 14 frames, which is not that fast, but it's fast enough to catch an opponent whiffing, or it's really fast to catch an opponent that's trying to like reset neutral in a sense. Again, like a lot of his strings are super slow, as you can tell, and they're all highs. So he kind of plays off of space because in this range, I can play off my forward too, which essentially would catch my opponent thinking that they can press a button in the neutral, or like kind of like, remember we were talking about like checking me so I don't get too close to them. So if they ever do this, I can whiff punish them from this range and I can get a full combo from that. This is where characters like this are super slow or don't have really good movement, or kind of slightly have good movement, but their buttons are not that good and usually highs. I can play off of my one string that's going to allow me to have my respect for my opponent. And since they're going to be scared of my forward too, this is when I can actually dash into their face and then create mind games off of my low or my overhead, or I can do things like this, stagger into a grab, or I can bait them to think that I'm going to go for a command grab, but I can actually just be a little more patient, turtle, and then from there I can kind of open them up. I can also bait them to think that I'm going to go for a string that has a gap, like right here. I can do things like this, kind of throw them off, B+, or I can absorb their hit from their armor, and then from there I can open them up as well. Now, last but not least, you have something called low profiling or avoidance. All right, now what a lot of people don't understand is that low profiling is very similar to like trip guarding. Low profiling is also really good for like certain characters like in MK11 or MKX, where they had like a normal that can kind of negate people jumping in at them or having to deal with certain things in particular. The number one thing is just low profiling, or just like using certain strings that will allow you to low profile. So I'll give you an example. So this character in particular has it where he can actually, you know, punish me for jumping at him right here. Like, you see that? This is a punish every time. And I can get a combo off of that every time as well. If I didn't suck at the game. And then from here, I can do things like that, right? This is going to low profile and is also going to allow me to get a combo. So it's going to avoid certain things as far as in like a jump-ins, jump in like punches or jump in kicks, or certain things where they might use a cameo to kind of like jump in and make themselves safe. I don't necessarily have to deal with that because my character hurtbox and hitbox changes depending on what string that I use. And it goes the same way with certain characters like Raiden as well. And then you also have like Raiden where he can low profile with a move, and it looks something like this. Now, it doesn't work necessarily against every character because some characters have really good active frames on their jump kicks, or jump punches. So it not necessarily would it always work, but it catch your opponent thinking they can jump at you sometimes, and you can kind of like low profile it with a move that allow you to anti-air, and then from here you can create, you know, layers, mind games, or you can take your turn back in some cases as well. As you can tell, I just trip guarded him. I can do that as well, as you see. And this is going to avoid him because my hurt box changes, so he can't even hit me from here. Things like this is what's going to help you have the advantage over your opponent, because you understand what buttons is going to allow you to actually play footsies, or kind of just abuse your opponent in the neutral, where you can essentially open up your opponent, take your turn back consistently. I'll try to make this video as quick as possible. I hope you guys understand exactly what I mean by playing footsies, and whoever needed to help with footsies and understanding footsies and definitely how to play them and lab them, I hope this video has helped you guys. As always, I appreciate you guys liking, commenting, and subscribing. It's your boy Jay-Z Bottom Lip.